Because it does take a minute just for everything to link up. And so I've been trying to start them a little bit early just to make sure everything's working. And everything's been really smooth today, luckily. So that's a good thing.
Well, that's good, right?
That is very good. So I'm going to turn off my camera and my mic, and I'll hit record. And then when the time hits, you can just get started.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
No problem. Welcome, everyone. I am so glad you are here with me today for Amplifying Thinking Routines using technology tools. I'm Debbie Tannenbaum, and you can find me on pretty much all social media at Tannenbaum Tech. If you have not already grabbed the bit.ly, I am putting it in the social wall, and we will be using the social wall quite a bit to have some interactions. So if I put a question in there, please feel free to respond in there. So if you, as I introduce myself, can introduce yourself on the social wall, I would really appreciate it. So please go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell me who you are and what you do so I can get an idea of who's in the room. So with that being said, I have just finished my 21st year in education as an elementary school educator. I am a tech coach in Fairfax County, Virginia at an elementary school. I blog and I have blogged on my website, Tannenbaum Tech, for the last 2.5 years. You can pretty much find me anywhere at Tannenbaum Tech. I am on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Voxer, Clubhouse. I also have a Facebook group now that I would love for you to join. And lastly, last month, almost a month ago, my book, Transform Techie Notes to Make Learning Sticky, was published. And today, what we're talking about in this book is all from chapter 3 of my book, where we talk about amplifying learning using technology tools. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for those of you who have introduced yourselves. That's great. I always love to get an idea of who's in the room. And just so you know, we're going to be talking about lots of different tools. Some of them are mentioned on here, and some, I actually think they're all mentioned on here. We're going to go ahead and get started. We are going to do 2 different things today. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to understand what thinking routines are and determine some practices for them. And then we're going to apply a strategy smash using these digital routines. So I am going to give you in the social wall a prompt so I can know what you know about thinking routines. So I'm going to ask you which number best shares what you know about thinking routines. So here are your choices. 1, you have no idea what they are. 2, you've heard of them, but you don't know much about them. Or 3, you know what they are and you use them often with students. So if you can go ahead, I've already put it in the social wall, and put a comment underneath and share with me what you know about thinking routines. That would be wonderful. As you do that, I'm going to go ahead and get started on sharing some of the goodness I have for today. So, thinking routines, I'm going to show you a brief clip from a video that explains a little bit about thinking routines. As I do that, know that I'm not showing you the entire video. I am showing you part of it. And if you use that bit.ly, you can absolutely look at the whole video. So I'm going to go ahead and share that with you to get us.
What can we as educators do to help students become better thinkers? One might assume that a good place to start is to teach thinking skills, but is teaching skills enough? We often miss opportunities to use the skills we have simply by not noticing times when they might be useful. Good thinkers not only know how to think creatively, critically, and deeply, they actually do it. They have a repertoire of thinking moves to draw on. They're inclined to use them, and they're sensitive to the times when thinking would be helpful. In other words, they're in the habit of observing, analyzing, and questioning. So can we teach this? Researcher educators at Project Zero have been exploring this question for many years and think the answer is yes. The thinking routines they have developed as part of their research invite learners of any age to be close observers, to organize their ideas, to reason carefully, and to reflect on how they're making sense of things. These routines are flexible enough to be used to engage learners with any artifact, system, or concept, including their own thought processes. Thinking routines are simple structures, for example, a set of questions or a short sequence of steps that can be used alone or with a group. They are designed to be easy to remember, practical, and to invite a broad range of thinking moves. They are well suited to leverage the power of collaborative thinking and transfer easily to any context. You can use them without training or prior experience, figuring out how they work along with your students just by using them. Thinking routines help students go beyond the superficial, inviting them to dig deeper by making the complex accessible. Through practice, learners become sensitive to opportunities to use their thinking moves in the wild, helping them to develop habits of mind that will sustain their curiosity inside and outside the classroom. What can we as educators?
We're going to continue on. And as I looked at the social wall, I saw a lot of ones and twos. And in a lot of ways that excites me because that means that I'm going to share something with you today that is really going to change a lot for you. And you're going to leave here today being like, how did I not know about these before? Because that's how I felt when I went through this work. So Ron Richhart, who is a leader in this work, says that research has found that teachers who are successful at promoting students' thinking tend to develop, adapt, and make use of specific routines to scaffold and support student thinking. Now, if learning is a function of thinking, then thinking is an extremely important thing we want to encourage for our students. So why do this? We first think about thinking routines as tools. So I think about this a lot of times that's why I have the tools up here. We wouldn't use a wrench or a screwdriver for a purpose that didn't suit it. If we want our students to make close observations, we're going to pick a thinking tool routine that does that. If we want our students to explore ideas, we're going to pick a thinking routine that helps them do that. So they're tools. You have to match the type of thinking with the tool that best works. There are also structures. When we look at thinking routines, they take students in a progression that scaffolds the thinking process. First, we do this, then this, and finally this. As we do these over time and we practice them, they become patterns of behavior. We're revealing something inside of our students that they're able to then use and unlocking it in the future. So I'm going to share with you a few of my favorite thinking routines. Now, as I start this, I'm going to say this many, many times today. The goal of using thinking routines is not to collect them. It's not to say, well, I used 10 thinking routines this week. That is not the goal. The goal of using thinking routines is to look at the thinking routines that are available. I sometimes talk about it like an all-you-can-eat buffet and decide which ones best fit your needs, which ones are for you. Not everything is going to be for you. So I'm going to share 3 examples of ones I like, and then I'm going to show you a lot of examples in practice. Now, as I do that, remember, keep an eye out for the ones that resonate with you. Not everyone is going to. The best practice for this is to pick one, have your kids get very familiar with it, become a pattern of behavior, and then find another one. It is not to do a whole bunch of them in a row. Okay, so the first one I'm going to share is See, Think, Wonder. You'll see an example of this a little later in the presentation. And this one is when you're looking at things. I love using it for museums like Smithsonian Learning Lab. What do you see? What are those straight out observations that you see when you look at an artifact? What do you think is the story? We're asking our students to make inferences. And then what do you wonder? Love that one. Usually a lot of people kind of can view this one as being the starter thinking routine, but it doesn't have to be. Connect, Extend, Challenge, I also really love. I love using this one with research. How does this connect to what I already know? How does this extend what I know or add to what I know, and what still challenges me? You'll see this one in practice as well. The last one, which I think is my favorite of all, is color, symbol, image. Now, I love this one because the depth of thought is so amazing. Choose a color that you think best represents the ideas in whatever the subject is. This particular example is done in Google Drawings. And then underneath there's a space why I chose it. Super important. Choose a symbol that you think best represents the ideas in and why you chose it. A symbol, something you should be able to recognize without explanation. And then choose an image that best represents those ideas. So really, really important. These are just 3. Now, those are 3 that are important to me. What I'm going to do right now is I am going to, in the social wall, I'm going to give you a link to the Thinking Routines Toolbox. Now, this has continued to grow over the years. When you click on this, I'm going to show you what you're going to see. You're going to see a whole bunch of things. Each of these are a type of thinking. The core thinking routines were the initial ones that they started with. You can have thinking based on possibilities and analogies, on perspectives, objects, synthesizing and organizing information, introducing ideas. There's so many of these. So I'm just going to pick one to kind of show you how this works. So I'm going to go to one in the core thinking, though you can go to one in any of these. They're all listed. So let's say I'm interested in, I used to think, and now I think. If I click on this, I'm not going to see much until I go a tiny bit further. I'm going to see a link in English and a link in Spanish. I'm going to click on the one in English, and it's going to give me all of this information. What is the purpose of this routine? How can I use it and apply it? How would I start it? One of the things that's really important, and you'll see as I share, is that using these thinking routines does not require a huge amount of, oh, I have to make this like fancy. You'll see in most of my examples, I'm using tables with some pictures, and that's it. So this is what I would like for you to do, and we're going to spend about 10 minutes on this. I'm going to give you one more link. And in this link that I'm providing in the social wall, it's going to give you a link to a Padlet. If you click on that link in the Padlet, you're going to see the directions. It's going to say, go to Project Zero's site and check out a few thinking routines. And then choose 1 or 2 that resonate with you and share a link to them and how you would use them. So let's say that this particular one that I just looked at really resonated with me. If I go ahead and I click in the URL and I do Control-C for copy, and then I go back to my Padlet and click the plus sign, which is right at the bottom right corner, and I go to the second icon, which is the link, I can copy that link in here and save. Look what happens. That thinking routine is now up here. Now I can write how I think I would use it with my students. So that's what we're going to be doing for the next 10 minutes is we're going to be exploring. Now, this is always, I have kind of bit the bullet, and I have premium Padlet. This will always be available for you. So this is going to be our way of collecting and crowdsourcing some. Now, every time I do this, there's somebody who shares one that I've never looked at before. And after the session, I immediately go and I look at it. So I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes. Your goal is to look through these thinking routines and pick one and then share it in the Padlet. Let's get started. I can't wait to see what you find. As you continue to search, please add them to the Padlet, hitting the plus sign. About 2 more minutes. Okay, we're going to come back together. I have to say, I am loving everything I'm seeing and so many great routines. Color, symbol, image, I'm actually going to show you an example of in the second part of today's presentation. Values, identity, and action. I need to explore that one. That one's new to me. I used to think, and now I think you'll see today as well. Think, puzzle, explore, you'll see an example. Facts or fiction is one I love. I don't have an example today, but I definitely need to get one. What makes you say that? Color, shapes, and lines. Take note is one I use very often. See, think, me, we. Headlines, you'll see an example today. Think, pair, share. True for who. I love that one. It's such a great thinking routine. These are awesome. And feel free to continue to add to this. This is for you to keep. So with that being said, we're going to switch gears a little bit. Now, like I told you earlier, the goal of this is not for you to do all of them. I'm showing you a whole bunch in practice. And that way, when you look at it, you can decide which way you want to start. What we're going to do is take these awesome thinking routines, which are awesome on their own, and we're going to strategy smash them with technology. In the next 20-ish minutes, I'm going to share a lot of information. The reason I'm doing that is I want you to kind of see what's out there. Don't worry if you're like some of it doesn't apply to you. That's fine. I want you to really think intentionally about why and listen to why I paired that thinking routine with that tech tool, because every time I do it, it's done very intentionally. I don't put a tech tool with a thinking routine that I don't feel like complements or amplifies it. So that's kind of where we'll start. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Padlet. So if you could just go ahead and select the number that best describes you with Padlet. I'll put it in the wall as well. And so 1 is, I have no idea what it is. 2 is I've heard of it, but I don't know very much about it. And then 3 is it's something I use all the time. To kind of give me an idea of what people know about it in our room. So while you're writing that, Padlet is a virtual wall that lets you post ideas. We just used Padlet. I love it because everybody can use it regardless of their location and really share, which is really makes it nice. It is freemium, which is something I don't like about it. You get 3 Padlet walls for free. I see somebody sharing in the social wall that they loved using it last year. And I'm seeing some 2s there, which is absolutely great. Like I said, it's a tool that I feel like is really worthwhile. Each wall is customizable and has different formats. I'm going to show you 3 different formats now. And you can use it with any of those accounts. So this is the first example I'm going to show you. This is that See, Think, Wonder that I initially shared with you. Now, as you look at this, the students were all looking at this picture. Now you're going to notice there's a whole bunch of weird stuff going on here. In Padlet, one of their formats is called the shelf. I call it columns because shelf doesn't really make sense to me. But with the columns or shelf format, you add questions on the top. There would be a plus sign for you to add it. And so the first question, what do you see in this picture? Second one, what do you think this picture is about? And third, what questions do you have? What do you wonder? In this, students had a variety of choices in their responses because it's Padlet. They could create a video. So anytime you see those smiley faces, those are videos. If you see these weird, wacky sound lines, that's an audio response. They chose not to be in the video. There's also some where they chose text. So students have lots of choices in the way they respond. Every time they push the plus sign underneath, they can add a new response. With this activity, students worked in partners so they could actually talk and support each other. When we're starting a thinking routine, the important part of it is not how perfect their video, their sound, what they write is, it's that they're getting in that habit of thinking. And so I like a lot of times using See, Think, Wonder when students have to observe or look at something, there's that match. The reason I like using Padlet for it is because of the variety of responses. Idea number 2 is headlines. It's one of the ones you guys mentioned. Now, as I talk about each of these, there'll be 10 ideas I'm going to share with you in the next couple of minutes. Think about why I've chosen them and I will be sharing that as well. Students were learning about the impact of plastics on the complex systems of the ocean. They had watched 2 videos with Edpuzzle to get some understanding and engagement, and they had to work in their groups to create a headline to encapsulate the ideas that they had just learned about as a group. There were 3 of these classes in this grade level, and they each had like 4 or 5 groups. Each group had to create a headline that encapsulated the ideas. The reason that I chose Padlet is I like the stream feature for this because it becomes a stream where you can look and see commonalities in it. You could have used another tool, absolutely. I just happen to like using headlines inside of Padlet. You'll see that there's a variety of thoughts. This group talks about thinking about the animals, but this one is focused on an action step of recycling plastics. In Padlet, you can give them that likes feature. That can be good or bad. These students that were able to handle it. Sometimes they get a little overwhelmed with it, but all of the thinking is represent this. These students were not in the same class as these students, yet they were all able to see each other's thoughts. Idea number 3. And if you have any questions as I'm going through them, please feel free to put them in the social wall. I'm really happy to address them there. This is, like I said, my favorite thinking routine of all. My students, I don't know about yours, cannot understand that Google is not a source. They think every time I ask them where the source is, they think it's Google. And they don't understand that not all pictures that you can find on Google are equal. And so I had them look at Jennifer Gonzalez's from Cult of Pedagogy's Using Digital Images slideshow. After they were done in their groups, I had them complete a color symbol image. They were asked, what color do you think best represents the ideas in what you read? What's a symbol that represents the ideas? And lastly, what is a image? Now, as I show you these examples, the thing that strikes me is that all of these are 100% different. They all have different ideas. This group chose red and they wrote why underneath. Now, in this particular example, they started out in Google Draw, and because you can add things on the wall to a Padlet, they were able to then share it as a JPEG and bring it up so everyone could see it. Once again, 3 classes were working on this, and yet they were all able to see each other's thoughts. This group chose blue, and they had their reasons. One of the things that's really important is making sure our students know that all of their voices matter and that they will have differing opinions, and that's okay. In this one, I did allow them to have some comments because there were some differences and the like feature. Like I said, that's a personal choice. That isn't the big deal. The big deal is everybody can see each other's thoughts regardless of their location. Perfect. So we're going to move on and we're going to talk about another tech tool. So I'd love for you to choose the number that best describes you using Pear Deck. And I know some of you might use Nearpod, and that's fine as well. 1, you have no idea what this is. 2, you've heard about it but don't know much about it. Or 3, you use it all the time with your students. And I really appreciate how many of you are participating. Pear Deck takes any Google Slides presentation and lets you make it interactive. You're going to see that there are some slide types I like using more when it comes to thinking routines. You have multiple choice, text, number, website. What's the other one? Draggable and drawing. Draggable and drawings are the ones that I like to use the most. You can show work anonymously, which is so valuable when we're sharing thinking. Sometimes we're so sensitive to those things. You can also provide students feedback as they work. You can give them additional feedback after the lessons, either with a student takeaway or using their new feature, review and reflect. And you can download all of this so you can kind of see that progression of thought. So as I'm looking at the social wall right now, I'm seeing quite a few 2s, a couple of 1s, but mostly 2s. So let me show you some examples. I'm going to show you 2 examples. And these examples were very intentionally done the way they are. Somebody earlier in the Padlet mentioned I used to think, and now I think. I love using this one in Pear Deck, and I'm going to explain why. This was actually done with a session just like this. Here's what I used to think about thinking routines, and here's now what I think. This person chose just to use text. And yes, if you're just choosing to use text, you probably could use almost any tool. However, this person didn't. This person put a question mark. And then they put words and wrote that they wanted to dig in. I love that one. The intentional combination of text and drawing. And in a drawing slide, once you add that Pear Deck extension, you can turn any slide. And you'll notice, like I said earlier, these are just tables, any slide into a drawing slide for your students. I see Laura asking if I prefer one. There are absolutely differences. I happen to be team Pear Deck, but there are things that Nearpod does that Pear Deck doesn't. And there are things that Pear Deck does that Nearpod doesn't. Unfortunately, like most schools, we don't have money for both. And we chose this year to go with Pear Deck. They both give you that interaction. However, Pear Deck has this awesome thing called Flashcard Factory that I really like. And, Pear Deck has just been really wonderful to our school in this past year, helping us out. So there's definitely differences. There's no wrong answer. This is my favorite one. This person says before they started, they were below the surface. They didn't have a clue. And yet now they're seeing that they were doing some of it after all, and they're excited about what they can explore. Really meaningful to use this drawing slide for this routine. Yes, you could use a Padlet, but you're not getting those same visuals if your students choose to draw and incorporate text and graphics. Another one, and this one I don't think you could do almost anywhere else. This is called Tug of War, and it's asking students to take a stance based on their opinion. This one was done at the beginning of the school year with teachers. And so all this is, for those of you who are like, how did you create this? I like to use Noun Project. For $20 a year. You get teacher access and you can use any of their images. And all this is the rope piece duplicated several times. I love using it for that. And so in this question, they're asked, should school be virtual or hybrid? This is something that if you did in your classroom, your students would be looking side to side, trying to figure out what their peers were going to say. They can't do that in Pear Deck. They have an icon that they're going to drag. You have a choice of icons. They drag their icon onto the rope, and they can't see what anybody else did until the teacher reveals it. And when the teacher reveals it, it's all anonymous. But look, now I can look at this and I get a really clear picture where the group I was working with, where they felt. There were a lot of people on this side. We were all kind of nervous about being, what was going on. Not as many over here. Now that's powerful in and of itself. However, if I add a text slide afterwards, then everyone can explain their thinking. So super powerful. They don't have to fear somebody's judgment. It's all anonymous. The only person who sees it is the teacher. Pear Deck also has a feature where you can have a co-teacher in. We have a lot of instructional assistants in our building. So they loved once they could get in as a co-teacher because they could also give feedback to students. So really, really powerful tool. And those are the two that I feel like always best fit the use of Pear Deck. Okay. Like I said, lots of information to share. The next tool I'm going to share with you is Flipgrid. So please go ahead and select the number that best describes you using Flipgrid. 1, you have no idea what this tool is. 2, you've heard of it but don't know much about it. Or 3, you know what it is and you use it all the time. Flipgrid is one of those tools that's always keeping you on your toes. In 10 days, they're going to have Flipgrid live where they'll announce all their new updates, and I'm sure it's going to be amazing. Flipgrid is a cloud-based video discussion platform. It gives voices to all of our students. We can choose, do we want to only have a couple students respond, or do we want to hear from them all? But Flipgrid, when it first started, was just mostly video. It's no longer that's the only option. It has many more options. Students can choose how they want to respond. They can do redos. They can use their sticky notes to gather their thoughts. Where I was teaching this year, half of my students were in person and half were virtual. It allowed them all to communicate as a community. It was really valuable. It really lets you see student growth. And as I'm looking at the social wall, I'm seeing quite a few 2s, a couple of 1s. So the first example I'm going to share with you, I intentionally chose to use Flipgrid with. And the reason is that it's called Circle of Viewpoints. Someone is sharing a viewpoint, and a viewpoint should be heard. The viewpoint is not going to have the same power or impact being read. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first started learning about the Declaration of Independence, we didn't look at it from different viewpoints. These students are. What they did is they learned about it, and then they had to think, who could this possibly affect? And they made a list. And then they got to choose one person from that list to do this activity. They got to share what viewpoint they're sharing, what they think that person's viewpoint is of the Declaration of Independence, a question that person might have, and then when ideas are worth fighting for. Every student in this class did this activity and then got to respond to each other and reflect on each other's comments. Before I play this video, I want to just put a disclaimer that sometimes when we record, it's not perfect. I've taught way too many kids using Flipgrid where they have to make a video that they have to find this perfect silent space. The goal is not the perfect video. The goal is the thinking. The thinking that happens is the valuable part. So there is some background noise. There's one point where someone says to be quiet, just letting you know that, but listen to the thinking.
I'm thinking of the Declaration of Independence from the viewpoint of an enslaved woman. Way too loud. I think that is unfair because they're saying that they are being controlled by the king, but they're not even thinking of how we feel. They're being a hypocrite. And a question I have from this viewpoint is, why are they saying like that they're being like taken control over, but they don't even know how we feel. And I think that when ideas are worth fighting for is when they're very unfair. I'm thinking of the
So as you can hear in this video, she's sharing all of those thoughts, and she was not the only one. In our small portable classroom outside, everyone was sharing their thoughts and then being able to give each other reflections. I love using this routine for that purpose. They're hearing the thoughts. Really, really powerful. The next one I'm going to talk about is for our littles. Think Puzzle Explore is one where we're asking students, what do you think when you see something? What questions do you have? And how could you find out more? Even our littles can use thinking routines. Now you're going to notice this is a little different. And one of the reasons I chose to use Flipgrid for this is that you'll hear me doing a little bit of prompting. We don't want to have language be a barrier or have reading or writing be a barrier to sharing thoughts. All students can share their thoughts. So this student is sharing his thoughts. You'll also notice he is not in the camera, and that is not an important thing to consider. The important thing to consider is he's getting in the habit of sharing his thinking. And once again, this is happening where other kids are sharing their thoughts at the same time.
I wonder why the American flag has 50 stars. I can search for information on Padlet.
So the student missed a question, and that's okay. The student is getting in the habit of thinking. One of the things that I've noticed is that as students get more familiar with this, they get better at it. It is something we have to practice. That's how it becomes a pattern of behavior. Okay. We are going to go ahead and you are going to share with me on the social wall what number best describes you using Google Slides or Draw. 1, you have no idea what it is. 2, you've heard of it but don't know much about it. Or 3, it's something you use all the time. I'm going to share one example for this one, and I want you to think about how it's a different use of Google Slides than you might be used to. When we talk about Google Draw, it's a digital canvas that allows you to create original artwork or visuals. When we talk about Google Slides, it gives you that opportunity to create artwork using one or more images. That's what we're going to be doing in this example. This is the Connect Extend challenge that I showed you at the very beginning. In this example, students have been learning about the American Revolution. We gathered them together and told them they were going to use a kid-friendly database called Kids InfoBits, which is now called Gale Elementary because software companies cannot help but rebrand. They had to search for an article. Once they searched for that article, they got the opportunity to use the instant citation tool to add that citation. Each student had a slide from, if we had 26 kids in a class, from 1 to 26, they each had a number. Number 1 knew they had to go to 27 because we had our objective here to start it. This is a collective note taking. Everyone has edit access. When everyone has edit access, you can actually see their little icons, so you know who's on what slide, so it gives them some accountability. You can even show it all on your board. Once they had identified their article, they shared, how does the article that they read connect to what they knew? How does it extend or add to what they knew? And what still challenges them? That's always the hardest part for our students. We have to get them in the habit of questioning and exploring their questions. Now, one of the things that I love about this is that if you have a student who's struggling, they get to see it modeled for them. Now, yesterday I was doing another session. Someone goes, well, how do we know they won't cheat? Well, the idea is to talk about that good digital citizenship. You don't mess with somebody else's work. And if you need to look at somebody's work to get an idea, that's okay. But I'm still expecting you to do your own thinking. When we have a culture of thinking, we're all expected, just like we're all expected to be part of a classroom culture. But let's say the person in number 2 finds the article in number 4 really interesting. Well, now you have a collaborative culture of note taking that everybody can participate in. And I just think that's so important. I love using the collaborative note taking feature in Google Slides. And many times I'll give my students places to take notes using Google Slides because I want them to learn to work together, because that's a lifetime skill that they're going to need to have. Okay, you guys have been great. We're going to do one last tool and then we're going to do some synthesis. So the last tool I'm going to talk about is Google Jamboard. Google Jamboard is a recent addition to this presentation. It's kind of won me over recently. Google Jamboard has just done so much amazing stuff recently. So 1, I have no idea what it is. 2, I've heard of it, but don't know much about it. Or 3, it's something I use all the time. Google Jamboard is a collaborative workspace where users can post sticky notes, pictures, words, and even customize the background image. You have up to 20 frames. When we're talking about frames, you can think of them as slides or pages. And you can have up to 50 people in it. And I find that's one of the biggest challenges, because I'm going to use a Jamboard with you later. But if I have more than 50 people in here, then I have to create a second Jamboard. And that is one of the struggles with Jamboard. And as I'm looking, I'm seeing some 2s and some 3s, which is great. Couple of 1s. So Jamboard, like I said, is a newer tool in my toolbox. I'm going to share 2 different examples using Jamboard. The examples that I'm sharing are things before Jamboard I might have done in a different program, but now I'm choosing to do them in Jamboard, and I'm going to explain why. Word, phrase, sentence before Jamboard I might have done in a Google Slides. I might have done it in a Padlet. I like using it in this format with Jamboard because I like being able to have those sticky notes. You can see this person here has put a check by it. This is from my Creating with Little session, and they're saying that they agree with it. So you're able to do things that you might not be able to do in another program. So I like that use of it in here. Somebody always asks me, how did I get a Slides Mania in here? Anytime you download a picture as a graphic from a slide, you can now upload it as a background image in Jamboard. It's definitely made me use Jamboard more than when it was just blank images. This is from my Empowering Student Voice session. Now, the reason I use Jamboard for this, and this is called Chalk Talk, and Chalk Talk is also a process. In the first part of the process, you share what ideas come to mind when you think of a certain subject. So in this particular example, I'm asking them to share what ideas come to mind when you think about empowering student voice and choice in your classroom. The first 3 minutes, I have them put their sticky notes in. Intentionally, just sticky notes. Then we go back to it and I ask them to make connections to each other's thoughts. Anything in a text box is done with the text. The text box is a connection. Very intentionally using Jamboard for that because I want them to be together. There is no price for Jamboard. It is a free tool, so definitely try it out. It's a great tool, and I know that Kim, Matina, and Alice Keeler just published a really great book on Jamboard. One of the things that's really cool about this is then I can have a second page where I can ask them questions, which is the third part of this process. So we've gone through all 10 ideas and I've given you a lot to think about, and we're actually going to practice using Jamboard right now. So I'm going to go ahead and give you that link in the wall, and I'm going to go ahead and open this. And as we look at this, you're going to see that what I've done in Jamboard, if you want people to participate, I've gone to that sharing and I've given anyone with the link can edit. So that's an important thing to just kind of remember, is that you want to make sure that everyone can edit. When you do this, this is one of the routines somebody mentioned. Today for our session, I'm going to ask you to answer as many questions as you can. Sometimes I'll say just pick one, but these are the questions. One, after going to this session and listening to what you learned about thinking routines and seeing some examples of thinking routines, what do you think is the most important point? Second, what are you still finding challenging, puzzling, or difficult to understand? What question would you like to discuss? And what's something you found interesting? So pick at least one or two of those to respond. I see James asking about spending money. Out of the tools that I'm sharing, Pear Deck, my school had a subscription to this year. So I was very fortunate. Padlet, my school also had a subscription too. I don't spend the only time I spend my own money on these tools is when I'm doing presentations on my own, because obviously I don't want to use my school account. But I'm really selective about the tools I use. I stick to the 10 tools that I find that are most valuable. Like I said, those are the tools that I talk about in my book. And I try to make sure that a good chunk of them don't cost money, because being a teacher is an expensive venture. So I love that I see people adding their ideas to the Jamboard. I love the fact that you guys have given me so many comments and questions, and I'm going to continue to let you spend a few minutes adding those in. So pick at least two to respond to right now. And if you didn't get the link, I just reposted it. I'm not sure if I posted it. I apologize for that. I think some people were in the session, so you have it now. Okay, I'm going to give you guys about 1 more minute. You'll notice that I have, using the text tool, added some comments in response, which is another cool thing. If everybody's using sticky notes, then you're able to also use that other feature to give some comments. And so all of the thinking routines obviously come from Project Zero. The work that I've done playing with them with technology is something that I've just felt super passionate about. So just really try to start with one tool. I think that that's the most important thing I can say. Start with one that you're familiar with, use it, and then add on. The goal is never to make your job harder. If a tech tool is making your job harder, then it is not the right tech tool for you. The goal of technology is to amplify your students' voice in learning and to help you better work with your students. And if it's not doing that, it's doing the wrong, then it's not the right tool. So just really keep those things in mind. These are really great. And I am so glad. I love the comments that I'm seeing. I know that once I finally was able to find this, the toolbox, whenever I do this session, that's one of the things that everyone always says. It's just amazing. And I'm really glad that Pear Deck is something that people resonated with as well. These comments are amazing. So I'm going to continue to let you add, but I'm going to kind of sum things up. And as I do that, I really do value your feedback. I'm going to, in the social wall, add a link to a feedback form. When you do this feedback form, you do have the opportunity, if you're interested, to opt into my weekly mailing list. Every Tuesday, I send out a newsletter that includes a couple of tech tips. Sometimes it will include some freebies of resources. It shares links to my blog posts and upcoming conferences if you want to learn more. I send it out every Tuesday, so you can opt into that mailing list if you're interested. You can also, if you're interested, I have Tannenbaum tech stick. I hate that. I can never get it just right. Tannenbaum tech stickers. So I'm happy to send some of those to you. If you're interested, please include your mailing address. Every session I do, somebody includes their email, and that doesn't help me at all. In addition, I've provided lots of resources for you on this slide. You have my email address. You have the email address of my website. Please follow me at Tannenbaum Tech if you haven't already. Plus, I've given you links to 3 articles specifically about thinking routines. One just on Jamboard. So if you click on that link, it's just about Jamboard. One about a program called Wixie that I did not address today that I usually use with my littles. And then this one is going to kind of address the majority of the things that I've talked about today and gives you lots of information. So please feel free to reach out. Lastly, as we get ready to close, like I said at the beginning, all of the things that are shared in this presentation come from my book, Transform Techie Notes to Make Learning Sticky. Chapter 3 is all about creativity and amplifying learning with technology tools. So if today's content resonated and you wanted to learn more, feel free. Also, if there's a tech tool you don't know about, in chapter 2 of my book, I have QR codes with trainings for all 10 of my tools to help get educators started, but always feel free to connect. And, you know, my goal is to be here for educators. I hope that when I do a session, I'm beginning a relationship where we can learn and grow from each other. And if there's something I shared with you today that resonates, maybe you'll tag me on social media and show me how you applied. And then I grow as well as everybody else who's a part of that. So I really, really, really appreciate everybody being here today. I know that the conference is wrapping up and that, you know, by the end of a conference, sometimes your brain is so full that you don't necessarily want any more information. You just need time to process it. So I really appreciate everybody being here today. You guys have really done a fabulous job. Let's go back and look one more time at our lots of stuff added on here. So like I said, this is all for you to keep and use as you need it. And if there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the social wall. And please do the survey. I'd love the feedback. As far as using this for special ed students, it is absolutely something you can do. You might just need to provide more scaffolding and determine which way is the best way for them to respond. And maybe the tech tool you choose is more based on what gives them the best accessibility. So You guys just did a fabulous job today, but I'm looking at the clock and it's 12 p.m. and I want to honor your time. And thank you for honoring my time with your presence. I really appreciated it. And thank you all so much for coming today.